good? Good afternoon. Is it after lunch? Good afternoon. Hi, everyone. I am Kara Hollingsworth. I'm the Director of Public and Political Leadership at Wellstone Action. Thank you. I'll take it. And I'm going to actually keep my introductions brief so that we can spend the majority of our time having and digging into this discussion and this conversation and hear from our incredible speakers that are joining us this afternoon. And so for the next 45 minutes, we're going to talk about how we build power through both direct action and electoral politics. We believe that truth is not something that we should run from, and especially now more than ever in this moment. And so we're hoping that this space is going to be somewhere where we can talk about the truth and these two strategies as organizing tools and the tensions and opportunities that arise as they exist together. So I want to welcome and introduce our two panelists, and then we'll turn it over to them for brief remarks before we move into questions and discussion. So first, I want to welcome Elle Hearns. Elle is a Black trans freedom fighter who hails from Columbus, Ohio. Ohio. She is a strategic partner and organizer with Black Lives Matter, and through her work, she has been committed to making sure that marginalized voices, especially those of Black trans women, are centered and reflected in the leadership of liberation work. And we're also joined by Congressman Donna Edwards. Congresswoman Edwards was elected to Congress in 2008, becoming the first Black woman to represent the state of Maryland in Congress. But I think I speak for many Black women beyond the borders of your district when I say we have looked to you as a voice in Congress for all of us. So I want to thank you all thank you both for joining us today. And with that, I am actually going to turn it over to Elle to get us started. After we have brief remarks, we're actually going to take questions from the audience. I will start us off with questions. One thing that I want to say is we're asking when you have an opportunity to give questions that they be that. We want to hear questions. Questions end with a question mark. They are not statements. They are not speeches. And we ask that you keep those questions to under a minute so that we have enough time to give everyone the opportunity to go ahead and engage in the conversation. And so with that, I will turn it over to Elle. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, y'all. Good afternoon. How's everybody? How's everybody? All right, y'all kind of quiet. So I am really honored. I said I didn't like the podium, and then I end up at the podium. Look at nature. I'm really honored to be here with you all. I am always thankful when I have the opportunity to speak in front of people. I was introduced to the space of RootsCamp 2 years ago as an organizer formally, and so it feels like a welcome back party of some degree. So thank you to the staff of Wellstone and all of you for being here. I was interested in this panel, this plenary, because I think we are in such a critical time of needed dialogue that for me consistently has been my life for almost the last 3 years as a proud organizer in the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm curious on where we will go and where we will be as people who are invested in this country's future and also this country's present. I think there's been a lot of conversations that have happened around this current election. Those have been the least interesting conversations for me. because I am invested in the conversations that were happening before the election. I've been interested in the conversations that were happening with the communities that I come from and the communities that are directly linked to mine. And so the only conversation I've wanted to have is which organizing strategy leads us to our liberation. What organizing strategy is going to end white supremacy? And so that's the only conversation that I've been interested in. Our results are where we have the ability to not only build power, but to actually win. And I hope that coming away from this, you all have some time for self-reflection. I asked the organizers of this space, how do you measure success? For those who come from the world of nonprofits, you understand measuring success or deliverables. But how do you measure success when liberation is directly tied to it? One of those ways that I think is to spend more time as organizers and just as people being reflective of what commitments you've made and how your contradictions in your life have actually influenced the ways that you organize and who you organize for, as we are in a critical time of not only building power, but building solidarity and truly building a practice that leads us closer to liberation. So I'm excited to engage with Edwards and all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Elle, and thanks, Kara, for that introduction. Hello, Wellstone Action. How you doing? All right. Me too. So here's the thing. After, after November 8th, November 9th was my mother's birthday, poor thing. But that's all right. She's getting over it too. But after November 8th, November 9th, I decided I had a couple of choices, and I bet these are choices that confronted you too. One was to drink. The other was to use a lot of profanity. I did both of those things. And then my other choice was to binge watch The Crown on Netflix, which I did, because I thought after our election, pondering the idea of a monarchy seemed like a good idea. But for real, I did all of those things, and then I finally woke up again on about November 10th or 11th and realized that I hadn't solved anything. So now I'm in my other mode, and like many of you, trying to figure out what do we do in this really important moment, and whose voices are lifted up, and how are they going to be heard. And so I decided that it was a good idea to be here, Kara. At first I said no. I'm confessing. At first I said no. It was like after the election, I said no. And then I said it was important to be here because the one thing that we can do, which was our work on November 7th, it was our work on November 8th, and it is our work on November 9th, and today is to organize. And what better place to do that than here at Wellstone Action? And so I also decided I wanted to do a little reading. And since I'm going to read directly, because what I chose to read was Frederick Douglass's speech on reform and the philosophy of reform that foretold the Civil War. And we've all heard the quotes from that speech. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. That was true in 1857. It is true today. I also read Power Concedes Nothing Without a Demand. Usually we read that, but we don't hear the rest of it. It never did, it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both. 1857. Now, I am not suggesting that we resist with blows, but I am suggesting that the opportunity we have now, probably clearer than ever before, is to resist with our actions and with our words. And so I feel a little bit more emboldened now that the election is over, because I feel emboldened. I'm a Democrat. I've always been a Democrat. Well, since I was like 18 years old. Actually, no, since I was about 12 years old when I really figured it out. And so I believe in imperfection, and so I have been a Democrat all that time. And I believe in that imperfection, that this moment allows me and us an opportunity to rebuild in a way that builds communities from the ground up and respects our differences and respects our diversity and believes that our diversity and inclusive is our strength. And I believed that on November 7th, and I believe that today. Now, there are some who want to tear down and to analyze this last election and tell us that it is because we've highlighted our diversity as women, as black women, as LGBTQ, as immigrants, as Latinos, as, you name the list, as Muslims and Jews and Christians. They tell us that we can't do that anymore, because that was about identity politics. And I'm going to offer to you that on November 7th, we were the rising American electorate, and today we are the rising American electorate. And the fact that people stayed home, and a lot of people did, tells me that our work to do is in organizing in every single community. And so I'm excited to be here, and I am not going to let the gaslighters gaslight me into believing that we did not win a majority of the vote, or gaslight me into believing that the issues that we believe that are important, that are about equality and justice and criminal justice reform and trade and equal pay for equal work, that is the work that was present on November 7th. It remains present today, and we have to organize in every single community in order to make that happen. And so I'm going to sit down right now, because we are going to take a lot of questions. But I really do want us to reflect back on those words of Frederick Douglass in 1857, because I believe in resistance. And some of us are going to act out that resistance on the streets, and others will act out that resistance within agencies of state, local, and federal government and change policies. And others of us will act out that resistance in our nonprofit advocacy organizations. And others of us will act out that resistance as elected leaders at every single level of government. But what happened on November 8th will only be redone and will only be fixed if we are prepared to act and resist those who want to normalize racism, sexism, homophobia. The laundry list is so long. We will not allow them to normalize that behavior, and the way that we do it is we organize in every community. Thank you, and it's good to be with you.
Hello, my name is Ashley Love, and I'm with Black Trans Women Lives Matter, and I have to run out really quick because we're facilitating the women's meetup at 2:15. But my question is, I've been feeling a certain kind of way about hearing a lot of millennials and of all ages actually saying that they didn't vote, and someone just said at another session that they didn't vote because they were radical. And they were black, and I thought it was irresponsible because our black elders really needed us to vote because they can't navigate certain things like the youth can. So how do we interact with people who are trying to shame people who did vote? And I guess if that's a question.
Hi, Ashley. Thank you for your question. This is like so awkward, so forgive me. So I did not vote, and Yeah, I did not vote. Um, Resistance for me, I've been just in this space of like really like what are the ways that we are defining the words that we are using, and how are they in relationship to what our actions are. So if you say that you are committed to dismantling white supremacy, or you're committed to dismantling racism, for me, like that is resistance. So resistance is defined as armed or violent opposition. So for me, as someone who does identify as a Black radical, who does identify my only political affiliation is Black, voting was never an option for me. And also shaming is never an option for me. The ways that people choose to navigate a white supremacist system is up to them. I can only be clear about the ways that I choose to engage, and also how my politic of engagement influences how I organize and what actual standard I'm holding organizers that I collaborate with too.
So I have a little different take on that, because I also believe that some of the, if you separate, I think, if you look at the crowd of Trump voters, and there are a collection of them who are the racist, xenophobe, homophobic, sexist, that list. They are. There's a group of them who are people who have been fed up with a current political process that doesn't speak to them. It is driven by money, it's driven by corporate power, it's left them behind in the economy. And they registered their anger, I believe, by voting for that guy. And then there are a whole set of folks who registered their anger by not voting at all. And so I think as somebody who did, and I believe that my resistance can come through by voting, and that it has power. But I do think it's really important for us. I want to engage Elle because I want her to understand and to feel her power and the perspective for her power in voting. But that also means that we have to have people who are willing to step up to elected leadership that we can believe in and that we can trust, and who we know are going to do our bidding and not the bidding of the corporate moneyed interests that drive so much of our political power. I also know that having come through a very brutal Senate campaign in the spring of this year with the forces of the established party lined up against me as a Democrat, what it did is it made me actually redouble the work that I want to do to fix our process. It didn't make me want to drop out, except for like a half a minute when I had to sleep. But for me, the way that we can turn this thing around for all of us, if we believe in justice and equality, is to engage in the process. And I believe that there are people who do that inside and out. And then lastly, I'll say to you that I learned organizing and the power of organizing by writing the first check that I ever wrote to any political candidate to Paul Wellstone. And feeling the power when he was elected, that he was elected by people power and organizing. And so in your name, you get to learn that in his name, and I got to learn that from him, and I believe that still remains the basis for our political power.
I want to ask a follow-up question, because I feel like I heard both of you talk about the relationship or how you view these two different strategies. So what should the relationship look like, if any, between these two organizing strategies of direct action and electoral politics?
Well, they're not the same, right? And the goals are not the same. And before I was in elective office, before I was in Congress, I was an organizer in my community. I ran organizations that challenged electeds, and it took me a long time for me to even think that I wanted to be part of that on the other side. And so I know it from, you know, that spectrum, and I think that there are things that can be done inside of being elected and holding political power, but I also know that the best examples of change come when there's organizing going on outside to press political leaders to do the right thing. And so that, to me, is what the interplay is.
Yeah, I want to engage you afterwards. I'm excited about that. I think that as an organizer, I am very clear of what the relationship is, because I'm very clear of what my desired outcome is and what I'm organizing against and for. And so it's not that I don't understand the power of voting, and it's not that I don't understand the power of having something to vote for. I just understand Black power. And I understand the reasons why Black power must be built in whatever is necessary in terms of like electoral, political, whatever organizing you wanna count on. So I directly organized in the city of Cleveland a campaign that led to a prosecutor not being elected. So yeah, I just want to be really clear about actually what the politic is behind why I don't vote, and also why I understand why millions of people did not vote. And then there's this other piece for me that I think is really important for us to really get into and to stop playing a game with it, is we actually are no different than our enemies. And what I've seen liberals and folks who identify as Democrats do is separate from the pack in the ways that they engage in like this capitalist system. And I think it's really important to understand that the relationship between organizing and a, what was your question? Electoral
Politics and direct action.
Listen, if you don't follow the people and you don't follow like what organizers are doing in their communities and what they are advocating for, and when people are in the street because bodies are laid in the street, like any type of election, it will always fail. It will always fail, and it will always fail somebody. So for me, I think I just have a different way of looking at this system, and I also have a different way of acknowledging that the system exists as opposed to just participating. I'm actually not participating as a way to encourage more people not to.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Courtney Richardson. I am from the Ivy Investor. My question is in terms of, in terms of engaging in the process, in terms of engaging in the electoral process, how interested are we in redeploying Howard Dean's 50-state strategy, the real grassroots, deep legwork down on kind of the community level through the local? How interested are we in doing that, and in doing that more specifically for 2018?
I think the 50-state strategy was never a strategy that acknowledged that everything is the same in all 50 states. And so I think it's important to be clear about that, because what is needed in terms of organizing for the purposes of electoral politics in one state is very different from what might be needed in another state. And so I think I agree with the general proposition that it's important for us to organize our party politics not just around presidential election cycles. I never think that results in what many of us need at the most local level. So for example, some of the most impactful elections are elections for prosecutors that have a direct impact on people's lives every single day, but are generally not part of the package of things that many, even state political parties, focus on, and yet they control so much of what happens in our lives. And so I think if the question is how will those of us who identify with the Democratic Party are going to rebuild that party so that it really begins to reflect what's needed in our states and local communities, we have to do that from the ground up, and much of that has to take place in different levels across the various states.
Hi, my name is Ryan Brown. This is my first Roots conference. Hello, right here. Thanks. Quick question. This primarily is for Representative Edwards. I think the biggest loss in this election was not the House or the Senate or the presidency, but more so the judiciary, from the federal courts, appellate courts, and any other courts. With that being said, what can we do as a grassroots organization or grassroots organizers to stave off these judicial nominations that are going to be coming from this unified government?
Well, I think that's why in my remarks I talked about the importance of not normalizing what is not normal. And when if our United States Senate does that by approving, whether it's approving a racist as the Attorney General or various state or federal appellate and federal judges, that will not be helpful. And so I would urge you, from whatever state you hail, to put the kind of pressure on your senators who have the ultimate call about whether a nomination is going to go forward. Those decisions, you know, and I agree with you, the loss in the court is huge because it isn't just a 4-year decision. Very often with these judges who are appointed, it's a 20 and a 40-year impact on us and our lives and our communities. And the only thing that can stop that is Democrats, in particular in the United States Senate, who need to be pressured not to normalize what is not normal.
Hi, my name is Ana, and I represent the Spanish community in New York. We back up Black Lives Matter. We work with them. We support them. But the problem we have is our children, they are half Black and half Spanish. They are now confused. They're asking us, our lives matter too, Mom? And I said to him, honey, at this point, we don't know we're going to Mexico or we're going to go to Africa. And I'm sorry, and that's my question is, how we can help the kids understand their lives matter, because I don't care you are Black and Spanish.
So I guess that's for me. Yes. I think this has been such a fascinating piece over the last however many years that our movement has been in existence around, like, when you say Black Lives Matter, does that like discard other people? I think there is a particular experience that Black people have had in this country. And essentially, there are many people who have had similar experiences. So it is not a discardment of any other community, but it is a centralizing way to say, like, this is the space to not only just acknowledge Black lives, but to acknowledge the ways in which other lives are informed by what's happening to us. So if we're being murdered by the police, then most likely if you are other in this country, you're gonna be murdered by the police too. So it's not necessarily a space of like separation, but it is a centralizing place because of just the historic goal context for Black people in this country. But I say that to say that in this time, and in this age where we are with this election and obviously just the current climate that's already been existing, there is a space that everyone must enter into acknowledging like the ways that anti-Blackness shows up in their communities that prevents them from being in solidarity with Black community. Because I think anytime the question is posed around what about me, that directly is a result of what anti-Blackness looks like. And so we can't talk about xenophobia without talking about the ways that anti-Blackness is associated with xenophobia. So there's just a much larger conversation that I would encourage people to have around Blackness, and then also their proximity to Blackness in regards to someone who is biracial. Yeah. And that's it. But that's it.
People will not accept them.
Yeah.
You know, they had to ask the question why my grandma look like this.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walk in with them, every time they stare at me. That's what I say. It's matter because it's my grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
I have 4 of them. And for me, it's like when you say for Black Lives Matter, we got together because that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we want to come together.
I think we can take probably 2 more questions.
My name is Michael Douglas. I'm from the great state of Minnesota, where our Senator Wellstone is from. I'm proud to be. My question is to you, Congresswoman. I would like to know, we lost the election to a great deal of the rural community, which is mostly the white up in the Appalachians, and et cetera. How do we reach out to them? They have the same issues that we as a whole have. How do we break that barrier and to at least support us in the next election?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I want to go back to what I said before, is that, so separate those other folks who, because of Donald Trump, have been given a voice. We've just seen them in a way that we hadn't been able to see them before, although we've always known that they were there. Let's talk about the group of people who are, you know, maybe they are union households in some of those communities. They used to work in, you know, manufacturing jobs or in steel mills and you name it. And I believe that there is a direct connection between their economic interests and the economic interests of urban communities. And I want to go back to a point that that Elle spoke to, because I do believe that the 46% of Americans who didn't vote were speaking emphatically by their no vote. I think that that was indeed a political statement, and I think that our real work has to be to go back into those places and organize in a way that enables them to see their future in engaging in a political process. And I have always believed that a no vote is in fact a voice. It is a way that people speak up. And I'll just share with you, I was in Florida, in Palm Beach, Florida, right before the weekend before the election. And I went into a barber shop, and there were, I don't know, 10 black men in this barber shop, a range of ages, and I asked how many of them had already voted. 1. And I asked how many planned to vote, and the answer was like, really none. And I asked, how many of you, if you were going to vote, would you vote for my candidate, for Hillary Clinton? And I only half of those who were remaining said yes. And so a message that speaks to the concerns of those communities is really important. When we have our candidates going around talking about 5% unemployment and 14 million jobs created, well, in some of our communities, whether they are rural white communities or they're urban black and brown communities, the unemployment is 30, 40, 50%. And so having candidates at a microphone talking about 5% unemployment, frankly, would not have moved me to vote. That's where we have to change our message.
Yeah, and just to speak to that, just because I love all of what you said. I keep saying Edwards. Can I call you
Donna.
Edwards?
My name's Donna.
Donna,
but you can
okay.
call me- I mean, Edwards is a good name because it was my dad's name.
Yeah, Edwards. I don't know. I like that name. But to the points that Donna was making, like that 46%, and I'm from Ohio, so I'm very familiar with, living in a world that already reflected Trump before Trump even got elected. So I just want to be clear again what white supremacy looks like. Everyone's freaking out, and it's like, this is the world that I already lived in. This is the world that communities that I come from already lived in. These 46% of the people that didn't vote, like, I'm not separate from these white people in Appalachia who didn't vote. Like, there's no actual separation there. There is a politic. There's a belief that is the separation. And so I think when we talk about engaging those communities or engaging those people, what is the basis of our engagement? And what is the basis of the resources that we're investing in those communities that we're not investing in those 10 men that Donna was at the barbershop with? So there's a conversation. Actually, it's not even a conversation because I'm very clear who my enemies are, and I'm actually done having conversations. There is action. There's action that needs to be taken to actually support the people in this country who will be left discarded by a two-party system, and that's just really where we are.
So we are at time. I just turned to Elle. I said this could have been like a 2-3 hour conversation. Definitely should have been. But in terms of you asked when we first came in, what should the next step be? What is the action? What do we want people to do? And what really stands out to me in hearing this conversation is, this is something that we have to start talking about out loud. We can't shame people and go, well, you're not doing it the way I want it done, or you're organizing in a way that looks different from the way that I'm organizing. So we just can't even, we're not going to talk about it. We have to be willing to have honest, truthful conversations and ask people about the choices they're making and how they choose to engage. And so I just want to thank the two of you for starting that conversation here and modeling what that can look like. And am hopeful or would like to see folks engaging and having this same type of conversation in their communities when they go home.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.